Thanks everyone for joining us, and thank you to our sponsor, Wines of Rioja, and to our brilliant panelists for sharing their time today. My name is Jacky Blisson. I'm a Master of Wine and a wine educator based in Montreal, Canada. I'm joined today by multi-generational family grape grower and boutique winemaker, Carmen Perez Garrigues, President of Marcas de Cáceres, Cristina Forner, and Brand Ambassador and Senior Trade Advisor for the DOCA Rioja, Ana Fabiano. We're going to start with a little bit of housekeeping. So this is a 90-minute session. It's going to be comprised of a 60-minute seminar and a 30-minute Q&A. If you'd like to ask any questions, and we definitely encourage you to please do so, please put them in the Q&A box, and we'll be dealing with those at the end of the seminar. And if you'd like to support Femmes du Vin and their wonderful scholarship program, you can visit the website at any time, which is femmesduvin.org. Also, if you want to continue the conversation afterwards, we definitely encourage people to jump on Instagram or any of your other social medias. And I think that we're going to throw those hashtags up on the screen. If they're not coming up now, they're going to be coming up quite shortly. So check out those hashtags and definitely carry on the conversation. So I think I was asked to moderate this panel because Master of Wine Theory studies are based around a holistic view of wine, really aiming to understand every step along the way, from planting a brand new vineyard and all the decisions that entails, to selling a finished wine to a final consumer. When we drink wine, we rarely think about all the people that are involved in keeping the vines healthy in order to produce a good crop, in harvesting, in transporting grapes to the winery, fermenting and aging wine, and all the winemaking choices that happen along the way, all the quality control, all the quality assurance steps, all the bottling process, the shipping process, the deals that are brokered between winery sales staff, importers, wine agencies, distributors, retailers, and so on. There are a lot of actors that are involved, and it's worth taking pause to consider all that is involved in that bottle of wine making it to your lips. So today, we're tracing that journey from the perspective of a grape grower, a winemaker, a winery owner, and a marketer of Rioja wines. For those less familiar with the Rioja region, I'm going to give you a brief overview, and then I'm going to ask Ana, as I said, who's the brand ambassador for Rioja, as well as the author of the award-winning book, The Wines of Rioja, to say a few words on why Rioja is a perfect fit for today's seminar. So we'll just start with a little overview of Rioja. And I'll ask if we can just pull up a map. Here we go. I love to situate us with a map to start off with. So you can see in the northeast where the orange is there, that is Rioja. This is arguably Spain's most famous wine region. It's located in north central Spain, straddling both sides of the river Ebro. And if we can see the second map, that shows you a little bit closer in on Rioja. There you go. So here you see the region is divided into three zones. You've got the Rioja Alta, which is the western portion. This is a cooler continental area with higher altitude plantings, a lot of clay, iron, and alluvial soils here. The Rioja Alavesa, which is located in the Basque area. This is a high altitude plantings, limestone soils, and the Rioja Oriental, which you might have known before as Rioja Baja, which is the eastern section. This is the lowest lying vineyards. It's the warmest area. They make a lot of full body wines here, and the more Garnachas planted here. So approximately 90% of the wine in Rioja is red wine. It's made primarily from the native Spanish grape Tempranillo, blended with Garnacha, Graciano, and Mizuelo. There is some white wine made primarily from Viura and Rosé, which is gaining a lot of recognition lately, as well as some excellent traditional method sparkling wines. The region has quite a varied climate, as I mentioned, those three different zones, and it's protected from the cool, damp Atlantic weather by the Cantabrian Mountains to the north and to the west. There's over 65,000 hectares of vineyards, and Rioja's wines are classified in two ways. By origin, much like the French AOC system, it's a tiered quality from a regional to superior single vineyard sites, which are called, and I apologize to my Spanish colleagues for my torturing of your beautiful language, viñedo singular. And there's also classifications by duration of aging. So you've got joven wines that have no minimum aging rules, crianza, which are aged a minimum of 2 years, at least 1 in barrel. Reservas, aged for 3 years, 1 in barrel, and at least 6 months in bottle before release. And then Gran Reservas, which have a 5-year minimum aging period with at least 2 years in barrel and 2 in bottle. Choice of oak is very important in Rioja. You see traditionally a lot of American oak in the region, and now a combination of French and American based on winery style and on preference. This is a signature feature of Riojan wines. But you've heard enough from me, so I'm going to pass the baton over to Ana Fabiano, who's going to say a couple of words on why Rioja is such a good fit to explore this issue of supply chain.
Thank you so much, Jackie. First of all, I'd like to express our gratitude for being here today on behalf of the Rioja Regulatory Control Board, the DOC of Rioja, also Wines of Rioja, Canada, and the United States. And we're very honored to be here. We understand that the current situation has impacted all of our lives, but concurrently, it's created this opportunity today, and we are grateful to Femmes du Vin for it. We're very excited to be here, and I think roots that connect us is so well represented through Rioja, through our two panelists today, because we are a region very rooted in a grower community. And that might not be something that's at the forefront of everybody's understanding or minds, but one that is so significant to the infrastructure of Rioja and who we are. So I hope that I answered your question there. So.
Absolutely. So now we're going to hear from our first panelist. We're going to hear from Carmen. Carmen Perez Garrigues.
Hello, yes.
There you are. Hi, Carmen. And Carmen is going to give us the perspective, explain basically the importance to us of the grower's role in Rioja and their major function within Rioja wine production. So Carmen, when we were chatting earlier, you really were talking about why Rioja is such a special place to work. And so for you, what does make Rioja such a special, treasured place for you to work?
Yeah. Well, Rioja is very special, but for many reasons. It has always been a privileged and a strategic location where in the river Ebro Valley and with mountains surrounded and very natural resources. And there have been always many people and many cultures that crossed this region and settled down here. I mean, there were the Romans, the Arabs, the Visigoths, the Christian in the Middle Ages that come here and cultivate the land. And the development have been constant, and it was in the 17th when the expansion of the sector, it is as you know now. Rioja wine have achieved a worldwide notoriety due to its particular conditions for cultivation, for the careful vineyard practices people do, and also wine elaboration is a perfect balance between tradition and new technology. If we're speaking about Rioja, I think that it can be defined as culture, but in its greatest concept, with its land, its experience, its history, all contained in a glass of wine. Also, its tradition and heritage. And all over the region, you can find the family line of great growers who really dream to maintain this tradition, the legacy, and to work very hard for it.
Absolutely.
Since the 19th century, there were villages where people work the vine to make their wine for their own consumption. And it is the value of the legacy, it is the experience, and also it is the heritage to maintain the cultivation of the indigenous varieties, also, and the memory of the region. Rioja also it's a way of living because there are many families who work in the vine and that what they maintain is this knowledge from generation to generation. And it is the challenge that we have to keep this motivation to the future generations. And also it's the harvest time. It's always a party here. We have just finished last week, and it is all over around. You can find the whole family picking and taking the vine to the wineries where they will do their own wine. It is like a party where it's a hard work during the whole year, but at the end, it's the jolly of the bunch making wine.
Thank you for joining us just after harvest like that. And I loved what you said about the heritage and the culture and everything in the glass. Can you tell us a little bit more about your family's background in grape growing and how important grape growers are in general to the Rioja region?
Mm-hmm. I continue a family lineage that of vineyard suppliers since 1930. The history comes long ago. I'm not going to go through very long, but it's true that my great-grandfather bought a marvelous estate in Rioja, Alavesa, upon he returned from Chile, where he lived for many years. And it was very long the time he spent there. So he decided to send my grandfather from Chile to Spain so he didn't lose the Rioja roots. And he grew up here with his aunts, and he decided to move to Madrid to study agricultural engineer. And after his studying, came here to apply all this technology in the state. It was a family estate that was the meeting point for the family. So I grew up there, having really good times with my cousins and the children of that work in the state. That it was a farm with olives and animals and vines. But it was my grandfather, the one who selected the varieties that have to be planted in the different parts of the state, because there are 3 terras and the different type of soils were better to one variety or to another. And so it was after that my father in 1974 that decided not only to be suppliers of grapes to the wineries, and my grandfather always made wine for our family, but my father decided to make a winery and a very famous brand in Spain, where after 40 years, I continue with the wine producing. Mm-hmm. After studying agricultural engineering in Madrid. So it's quite a long history.
Long family history. And grape growers in general in the Rioja region, what is their role and how are they important to the Rioja region as compared to other wine regions?
In terms of vineyard structure, Rioja have more growers than producers. There are 15,000 growers and only 600 wineries and 30 cooperatives. So this is expensive New World style of vineyards are extremely rare in Rioja. It's so different. And there are only like 15 large wineries who make and who account more than 50% of Rioja sales in the market. And the other side, there are little wineries who make wine, but it is in the structure is you can understand that the development of Rioja have been most of all because of the big and large wineries.
Of course, and you were telling me about different sizes of, sorry to interrupt, you were telling me about different sizes of grape growers as well, that there's almost sort of 3 different styles of grape growers.
Yes, I think that we can classify it in 3 different types. Now, the ones who have perhaps small plots that they work for their own consumption wines, and they share their time working in local industries of the region, and in the weekend perhaps they look after their plots. They are the suppliers to the largest wineries who make contract for selling the grapes.
Right.
And there are three. The third one can be the small wineries that make limit production of wines.
Terroir sort of specialists in a way.
That's it.
How has the role of the grower evolved in recent years? If you're looking at new generations, more education, you were talking about more technology recently, more environmentally friendly practices. How have you seen that role evolve over your time in Rioja?
In the last years, Rioja have made huge progress. One of the most important, from my point of view, is that they have achieved quality from the terroir. The current grape growers have the sensitivity and the attachment to the terroir, and their inspiration talks about land, also of this tradition, but also knowledge and dedication.
Absolutely.
This is the vision of the new viticulture, the quality as commitment. Nowadays, growers have the knowledge inherited from their ancestors, and also this experience and training to overcome all these technology difficulties. And they combine traditional practices with new technology, painstaking viticulture practices, more friendly, environmentally friendly practices, and biological, with less use of phytosanitary products. And also they preserve the varieties and the old vines. And
yes.
You know that here in Rioja, there is the greatest concentration of plants with more than 70 years old.
Older than 70-year-old vines, wow.
Yes, what means low production, low yields, and very good quality.
What are the major challenges that you think that are faced by Rioja's grape growers today, and how do you think these are being faced and overcome?
Well, I think it's climate is very important. Terroir, also the use of varieties and this preserval of old vines. Rioja is a perfect location for cultivation of the vine, because here we have the three principal climates in Spain all together in such a small place. We have Mediterranean, Atlantic, and continental, most of all, with hot summers, cold winters, and moderate rainfall during the period. There have been a climate change, but I think that it's happening all over the world. And things are changing, really. We have this, the handicap of too drought in summer, or also the frost in winter, or the storms in spring. You have to work with that, and you have to.
How do you deal with things like drought, for example? You said drought is rising. How is that?
Yeah, well, there are two main things that have been changing the last years. One of it's the up in the hills, where the marginal places to vine production now are full of vines, because the altitude and the temperature is not a handicap now. Yeah. Or irrigation, for example, we didn't use to irrigate our land, And now this is more and more worldwide.
Right. Okay.
Going to drink, sorry.
No worries. And you talked a little bit about yourself that you were segueing from your family had moved from a role as purely a grape grower, and then in your father's generation, you've been carrying on. You've started as a boutique winery, and now making a very famous wine brand in Rioja. How did that transition occur?
Well, I was studying in Madrid in agricultural engineer, and I decided to come back to my grandfather's land because we have this marvelous state and these old vineyards that have been planted so long, and this is the legacy that I'm happy to have, and also I have the brief to go on to make this wine of expression of this terroir. And I mean, it is the combination of different soils, different varieties, perfect climate, and working closely with the varieties, you can give this expression of really nice wine. And so I'm working very hard for it, and I'm happy because it is being recognized.
Yeah, that's Ana raving about your wine. So I think that's fantastic because you have the understanding of the grower's perspective and such a fine knowledge of your terroir that you can bring into crafting this wine. I don't imagine any of it's available for us in Canada yet, but hopefully love to try it someday. We're going to segue now we're discussing the role of the grape grower, and now we're going to look at Cristina Forner as the president of Marques de Cáceres, which a big buyer from a lot of grape growers. So segueing into grape growers, into the winery, and all of the decisions and the roles that go on in the winery in terms of the supply chain of how the bottle gets to your table. So Cristina Forner is the president, as we said, of Marques de Cáceres, a highly reputed family-owned Rioja winery exporting to over 130 countries. Cristina holds a degree in business administration, and she managed exports at her family's border estates, Château La Rose Trentadon and Château Carmen, as well as working in real estate in Paris before deciding to move to Rioja and head up exports and eventually take over the presidency of the winery. So Cristina, thanks so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure to receive your invitation and to be part of this Femmes du Vin and to talk about Rioja, which is such an exciting wine area.
Absolutely. So your family was making wines in Bordeaux before you returned to, your father returned to Spain to establish Marques de Cáceres. And how different did you find the Rioja model with its many small growers? How does Marques de Cáceres work with its grower partners?
Yes, well, obviously, when my father came from Bordeaux, he tried to create this terroir notion. So at Marques de Cáceres, we source our grapes from tiny plots of land in Rioja Alta and Rioja Alavesa, mainly planted with old vines. Owners of some of these vineyards received shares from the company when we started the foundation in 1970, just to guarantee our supply. Our team supervised the technical direction of the vineyards, and we decide on the date of the harvest to pick the healthy and mature grapes. We work on long-term contracts with the growers, which are renewed every 5 years, should the quality criteria are fulfilled. The grapes are paid on an average price observed here in Rioja, plus a bonus, which is referred very often on the age of the vines, the color, and the sanitary stage. And those growers, obviously, who own shares are also receiving the company dividends. On the other hand, we also own a single state vineyard in Rioja La Vesa, close to the Cantabrian mountain, where we get most of our supplies to make our high-end wines.
Right. And from 1970, when your father started the company, to your arrival from Paris in 1984, to today, which is your 50th anniversary, you must have seen so many changes in the way the grapes are grown and the wines are made in Rioja. What are some of the major advancements that you've implemented at Marques de Cáceres and witnessed in your region?
Yes, well, first I would like to talk about our family history, my involvement, and the evolution of our activity. So Marques de Cáceres was founded in 1970 by my father, Enrique Forner, who gained a long wine experience in France and more especially in Bordeaux, as you mentioned before, in Château La Haute-Saint-Odon and Château Camassac, a classified growth. But when he decided to return to Spain, his homeland, he left during the Spanish Civil War in 1936, he chose Rioja, which is one of the most prestigious wine area, to create Marques de Cáceres in 1970. At this moment, he focused his efforts on terroir, as I mentioned before, and also he used his borderless experience to make a new style of wine, mainly inspired by his borderless experience.
Right.
So we made full bodied red wines with the right balance fruit and oak, and fresh and fruity whites and roses. And those wines marked a revolution in those 70s as they moved away from these traditional over-oaked reds and these whites and rosé, which on that time used to be almost oxidized.
Right.
So personally, I joined the company in 1984 after being trained in our chateaus and worked in Paris. So moving from Paris to Rioja has been a challenging decision, but quite essential, as I thought that the history of my family well deserved my involvement. So on my arrival in Rioja, I was impressed by the landscape because it's, I would say it's so attractive, so beautiful. You get this hilly countryside, this Cantabrian chain, and these vineyards which are spread all around. And you just realize the dimension and the potential you have to make wines, and wines which may have difference. I think that very often we think that Rioja is more or less the same style, and it's wrong. I think that it's quite important to know the terroir and to work according to every single plot of land. Well, for years, I've been in charge of the export markets, traveling around, developing the existing markets, opening new ones. I've been in Canada, in the United States. And I took over the company in 2007, the presidency of the company when my father retired. So over the past decades, we have been working closer to the terroir by adapting our vinification to every selection of grapes we make during the harvest, according to the different soils, the exposition, the altitude, well, just to enhance the differentiation of our wines. We have also reinforced our equipment with a sorting table, different small stainless steel and wooden vats of different capacity to pursue our artisan process of production. We have a cellar barrel with a large proportion of French and new barrels to age our reds and gain this distinctive smoothness and complexity. So our Crianza our remaining 14 months in oak, our reserve are 20 months, and our grand reserve are 24 months. Just mention that our reserves and grand reserves are only made in those very good or exceptional vintages.
Okay.
And aged in new French oak barrels. So it's also completed by a further aging in bottle. Chianti has another 14 months, reserve has 2 years, and grand reserve has at least 3 years. And I would like to stress out that this bottle aging is quite unique to Rioja. And it's a guarantee that the great quality wines are tasting smoothly once they are launched, even though they have a potential for aging.
And that's an important point that you bring up there, because it's very rare in this day and age to buy a bottle of wine. Most people buy a bottle of wine. I think statistics show that in most countries, wines are consumed within the 24 hours of purchase in about 80% of cases. People don't have large houses with cellars anymore. And it's very rare to be able to buy a bottle of wine that is ready to drink, that really is pre-aged, if you will, in cellar. And the cost outlay to the wine region of keeping these wines back for, you're saying the Grand Reserve is 5 years or more, reserves for 3 years is really something to consider when you think about how much you're paying for a bottle of Rioja on the shelf. The quality for value ratio is pretty exceptional, and it's something that's very special to Rioja.
Yes, it is. It is really. And I think that it's one of the great value Rioja has, especially in these excellent quality wines, obviously, because we have different business concept in Rioja as in any other wine producing area.
Absolutely. And do you think that the average wine consumer is aware of all that goes into crafting these fine wines from Rioja?
Some are, others not that much. But in fact, at Marqués de Cáceres, our conviction is so focused on terroir, craft production, and prestige to position our wines that we understand that it's our task to promote the wines, because if nobody knows about our values, there's little to do. So I think that first, we have to talk about quality, and our range of wines include a large selection of whites and roses, which are fruity and crisp. Our Crianza, which is showing a smoothness, and Reservas and Grand Reservas, their complexity, their elegance. And we also have two iconic wines, Gaudium and MC, which are made from very old vines. One of them could resist the phylloxera. It's 1.5 hectares, so it's quite a testimony of this beautiful appellation. And all these wines are sold out at different price points, but at the same time, they are honestly valued because we want to remain competitive in this prestige segment. They are highly recognized in the 130 markets where we export our wines. And that at the end, we have to meet the people's expectations, bring pleasure and create experiences. One of them is the gastronomy, where we have the opportunity to show the uniqueness and singularity of our wines. Either it is with the homemade food or local food or even the most sophisticated restaurants. And our wines are very versatile and they match with any dishes. But at the same time, we have to promote our wines. And I say it's you can have the best wines in your cellar, but if nobody knows, you have to promote your wines, and you get so many opportunities to do so. So it can be through the press, social events, social medias, tastings. I think we have great opportunities and great values to face our future and the growing, I would say, wine globalization. And it's where we think that quality wineries here in Rioja have a great potential and future.
Absolutely. And that's a great segue to move into chatting with Ana Fabiano, as we said, who is brand ambassador, senior policy advisor for the DOC Wines Rioja, based in the States. And with so many competing wines and wine regions vying for consumer attention on retail shelves nowadays, how do you go about carving a space for Rioja wines?
Well, thank you, Jacky. I think after listening to Carmen and Cristina, I think one overarching piece is that Rioja has a culture of wine. And how do we define a culture of wine? A culture of wine is a wine place of origin where its civilization, its economy, its terroir, its purpose, its values are all embedded in its identity. And it's quite powerful. And in Rioja, there is an ancient, classic, and modern history and culture of wine. And I think listening to Carmen and Cristina, it's rooted in both of their work, their vineyards, their life. Carmen is 40 years of 4 generations. And hearing her speak, it's ensouled in her being, in her training, in her heritage, so that now she's manifesting it like a great artist through her own wines. And Cristina, whose winery has experienced its 50th anniversary this year, and as an expat, I believe her father's family was from Valencia. And to hear her say he marked Rioja as the place that he wanted to go and invest in when he returned to Spain. It's all very powerful. So we take that, and that's what we bring to the port of entry, to Montreal, to the warehouse, then perhaps to another warehouse, then perhaps to the insulated wine bag of the sales professional, to the Psalms table, or to the kitchen counter of the consumer. That's really one of the key pieces that we bring. And the landscape at POS, at point of sale, it's a jungle. Mm-hmm. It's a jungle where you need a machete to get through. And perhaps Cristina mentioned it a little bit more eloquently, but it is a jungle. You need a machete. Today, the wine industry is very consolidated, it's saturated. There's white labels, there's private labels, there's DI brands. And then there's this whole other array of marketing created products that were created in response to a hot trend or a category like rosé. So they're the polar opposite of a culture of wine.
Of a heritage brand, yeah.
So that's what we have. So what do I do? The first thing that we do is really intend to communicate who is Rioja. Mm-hmm. And that's been all very eloquently communicated today. And that's the first piece.
So in light of all that, how would you sum up Rioja's unique selling point?
Oh, our unique selling point?
Playing a devil's advocate, you could say that a lot of regions will talk, specifically about everything you've mentioned in terms of culture and heritage. What really?
Yes. Well, I think the first piece is that whether it's a large winery or a small producer that's measuring their production in bottles, Rioja is anchored in authenticity. And that is a key piece. And quality, the trade and consumer can trust. Yeah. Every bottle of Rioja has an official trust seal that's usually on the back. It has an
anti-fraud. Explain that a little bit, that seal?
The seal is an anti-fraud hologram.
Okay.
That is on the bottle of, to have one here, of every single bottle of Rioja wine. And if you turn the bottle, it's usually on the bottom. And it's an anti-fraud trust seal. And there's a lot of people and professionals behind every bottle of Rioja wine that are really working for that bottle of Rioja wine. And I also think there's this tremendous grassroots solidarity. I don't think, Rioja is much like Champagne in the diversity of the construct of a region, But I don't think from the inside they see the lens as much as we can see from the outside, that there is this tremendous solidarity, and it was very grassroots when you research the history of Rioja. And then also what you touched upon with Cristina that I think is so important is that this has been for a very long time, that Riojas are released ready to drink. They really are. The barrel and the bottle aging really is part of Rioja's identity and their history. And with other wines where perhaps the acidity is too high when they're released, or the tannins are too tough, and then you have to like have a panic attack about what kind of food you're going to pair with that wine. Yeah, it's and you know, I heard you say that 80% of wines are consumed within 24 hours, but there also is the young collector when we go out, and it might be a young couple that really are hobbyists in wine and they love wine, but they don't have $10,000 to start their personal cellar or collection, and they really can become hobbyists with wine, but with Riojas, but still put them away for 5 or 10 or 15 years and still have a wallet and still be able to meet their mortgage or something else. And I think another unique selling piece that I'm really proud of, and speaking of the solidarity of Rioja, is really the region, the DOC region and the Rioja Regulatory Control Board has had a strategic plan to take Rioja beyond their physical boundaries. So as Cristina cited, they're in 130 countries, and Riojas can be found in 130 countries now. And so this consensual process of really investing in taking their wines beyond their borders by running promotional, educational, informational campaigns. Now there is even a Rioja Wine Educators program. You can go to the Rioja Wine Academy and from your home or office, you know, take the certification program. It's absolutely it's astounding and very important to understand the place. We also have an enological station that was created in 1892 that's in Aro, and it has existed without interruption. And it's an epicenter for research and development, and regions and producers from all over the world go there for consultations or testing. So these are some of the key unique pieces.
You're talking also about Tempranillo in terms of it as an indigenous grape and in terms of its style.
Well, Tempranillo is an indigenous grape, and that's one of the pieces that really inspires me about Rioja, in that 90% of our production are red wines, and Rioja is one of the greatest red wine producing regions in the world, and we are loyal to our indigenous red grape varieties. And that is one on the worldwide stage that I think is so important for each wine region today for their identity. And we believe we have the finest expression of Tempranillo. I think growers and winemakers and winery principals are in deeper relationship with Tempranillo than they were. And as Carmen clearly said, there's this dedication that perhaps didn't exist before than Tempranillo.
I imagine as the grapes age as well, and you see the potential they unleash with the older vines and
it's the collection of comments that I have in my book of the voice of the vintners. I asked them to say, Jacky's sitting here, Carmen's sitting here, Tempranillo's sitting here. How would you introduce her? And it can be made as a young wine, a semi-aged wine, a very aged wine, that it can work as a monovarietal, that she allows for room for roommates, and that she can blend well. There were really beautiful quotes about Tempranillo. So we believe we have the finest expression of Tempranillo.
So, and if we can just talk about you for a second, what drew you to work with the wines of Rioja, and how, having studied and worked with the region for so long, how has your appreciation for the region changed over the years?
Well, I began in the wine business in the late 1980s. And at that time, it was like being a male nurse at that time. Only about perhaps 2% of the professional in the wine business at that time was female. So it was different. And then, similar to what Cristina shared, there was Rioja primarily on the international stage. There was Rioja, Jerez, and Cava, which isn't a denomination of origin, but 98% is produced in the Perez. So that's when my journey with Rioja began. And I think some of the most salient points in the last perhaps 10 years or 15 years are ones that Cristina and Carmen touched upon, in that quality is not just paramount. As you said, many regions strive for quality, but quality is a driving force in Rioja right now. It's a driving force. And this pursuit of excellence and quality is really become very forefront. And innovating with such new designations as viñedos singulares or vinos de municipio that would honor these 144 villages that Carmen spoke of at the beginning, are ways of Rioja innovating, but without sacrificing her identity. Right. And that is, there is magnificence in that for sure. And, you know, most importantly, professionals like Carmen and Cristina have these incredibly unique, beautiful stories, but they're more common than not in Rioja. Yes. So sitting on the other side of the Atlantic, how could I not be inspired and proud to work to represent these wines and these growers and these wine professionals, or to write a book and lock myself up for 3 years researching for a book. So it was all of that. And I think what's most salient for me, and I have children
raising
too.
Young children at the time.
Yes. So they, so they contributed to that mission in certain ways, and had to respect it. And I do believe that even if they don't say it, they see it. And at some point, by the time they reach 18, it is appreciated, that it is noted in their being somewhere. But last year I had this eureka moment where I realized that in Rioja, heritage sets a standard, not a price point. Mm-hmm. And we work in an industry where price points oscillate tremendously. Mm-hmm. You know better than I do, and they're often not directly related to quality. Yeah. So that pursuit, that driving force of quality, and where heritage sets a standard, I think is definitely a significant trait of Rioja.
That's a great segue into one of the questions that we've been asked here. I think we'll open it up now to some of the great questions we're seeing coming in here. And this is a question for anybody that wants to jump in. Maybe we can start with Carmen, but the question is, what are the panel's thoughts on a more terroir-focused proposition in Rioja, as opposed to the more well-known aging period? And I'm not sure if the question comes from somebody who is aware that there is now a classification in terms of origin, as well as the classification for aging. But how has that changed? How has that changed the region? So the question, what are your thoughts on this more terroir-focused classification? Carmen, did you want to?
I think it's an important step towards a recognition of Rioja diversity. Mm-hmm. And it's only a different point of view. It is not only of time of aging, but also how can the field can be managed. Because this classification, it is not only of type of soils, it is always, it is also for how old is the vine, and it has to be 35 years old to be recognized like a plot of single vineyard. It is the soil, it is the age of the plant. It is also that it has to be managed with a careful harvesting, with small boxes of 20 kilos and not more. And you have to translate it to go to the cellar. And then the elaboration process have also its own particularities. So it is the whole process that it have to be done in a specific way.
Wow. Cristina, did you want to comment on how you feel this more terroir-focused classification, how that's potentially changed things in Rioja?
Well, I think it's always very good to bring some innovation as far as you can bring higher expression in your wines. So this is a differentiation which has its public, and I think it's quite positive, even though it's only represent a very tiny part of the production. But it's I prefer to focus on terroir and expertise and craft production, artisan process, instead of big volumes and expensive prices. I think that all these decisions are very helpful to reinforce the prestige of the appellation, and I think that it's a strong value again to identify the quality of our deal.
So there's essentially, it's a pyramid system, the new qualification, where you have a regional origin classification at the bottom, and then you go into more of a single village element.
Yes, because it's a very limited production, so it's supposed to be in the pyramid. Even though, for example, since it was in the 90s, Rioja started to make the new generation of wines, the Alta Expresión. Well, our Gaudium and our wine, which is called MC, are part of these wines. So as we have already those wines which are made with a totally artisan process from very old vines, and as I mentioned before, Gaudium, one of the vines is could resist the phylloxera. So, but we've kept already this concept, and we think that it's already established. So we have our own single estate vineyard where we are making part of our innovation, and we are working towards this trend, which I think is very positive. But it should not replace the part of the tradition we have, because the tradition is also getting the modern expression. I mean, the tradition, because we have the terroir with the old vines, with the expertise, and the way you are expressing the soul of every single vineyard. So that's very important, but you have also the opportunity to get a more modern expression to the wines. So it's that good balance between the tradition and the modern style. And I always say innovation is very good while it's remaining, because otherwise it's like a fashion. No, it's just lasting for a few months, a few years, but it's not bringing values to the appellation.
Absolutely. And Ana, how do you feel that the consumer, have they integrated this notion that there is now an origin, a sense of origin classification? Do you, when you're out speaking to consumers, do you speak more about terroir since this?
I think one piece with Rioja is that the viñedo singular designation is not really meant to be more, the view perspective of Rioja, not meant to be a pyramid as much as another form of expression, especially from growers such as Carmen, that have these privileged vineyards, which are really, as Cristina said, a small percentage of what is our production. So it's another form of expression. And the modern style wines from the 1990s have their niche. And I think that the Crianza, the Reserva, and Gran Reserva, instead of focusing on the aging component of them, a lot of the wineries are really, there's a lot of terroir behind those vineyards as well. But their definition is part of the identity of Rioja. John Radford, the great British journalist, wrote in his book, The Wines of Rioja, did a survey and in 2004, and most of the wineries, 94% agreed that they wanted to keep the definition of Crianza, Reserva, and Gran Reserva as it was part of their identity. So for me, I try to present it as a point of departure for understanding the region, a little bit of a compass, but therein you have to research around the quality of the grower or the winery or the zone where it's from. But this movement to be more terroir focused is definitely part of the innovations that have been happening in Rioja.
And I have two really interesting questions here. I can't even decide which one should go first. One of them concerns the grape Graciano. We're seeing more people speaking about it, and the question was essentially, what do the panelists think about the grape and it playing potentially being in greater proportion in future blends of Rioja? Does anybody want to jump in there? Carmen, maybe? Graciano?
Yeah, she knows.
Well, I am a passionate with this variety. I like it so much, and I always make in my blend a big quantity of Graciano because it's the fruit, the color, and the expression that it has. It was a pity that some years ago the growers decided to take off the Graciano because the yields were lower than the Tempranillo, and so it was a variety that was disappearing. And I'm very proud that my grandfather planted 5 hectares in a part of this terrace in the middle part with really huge pebble that gets very well with the variety. And it is complicated to produce, but at the same time, I think it's a richness. And now you can find more and more wines, monovarietal from Graciano, and you have to be patient because the cycle is longer than Tempranillo, and you have to manage the in different way of Tempranillo and take care in different cycle time. But at the end, I think it's a very, very interesting variety in Rioja.
Do you mean that it's later ripening when you say the cycle time is different? It's a later ripening variety, so it needs a longer growing season?
Yes, but for example, in my state, as I say, these pebbles, it makes this effect to the plant that during the day, the hot accumulates in the pebbles, and during the night, it goes through the plant, and at the end, the cycle becomes earlier than the normal in another, if you plant it in another type of soil. And so that is
the heat and then radiating it at night to help with ripening. Yeah.
It's very interesting. I really love it.
Do you see in your blends, in your Tempranillo dominant blends, do you see Graciano becoming a bigger and bigger part of that?
Yes. You have to be careful because it's very expression. So perhaps I think it's not more than 12% in the blend, but I think it gives a lot of things to the wine.
Oh, you say the 12%, that's the DOC rules in terms of how much you're allowed to use?
No, it's not the rule. It's I think it's the perfect blend.
Okay.
It is to not more than this 12% or so, because it could be it is a balance between the expression of Tempranillo and the Graciano. And I think it's perfect in that level.
Cristina, are you using more Graciano in your wines? Is this a great important?
We used a small percentage of Graciano because we like this fruity character, this acidity, and this refreshing point of that fruitiness. Well, obviously, we are not very expert on Graciano because we use like 5% in our blend. sometimes. And talking about the blends, every year it can, well, obviously our main grape, the main grape we use is Tempranillo, but according to the style of wine you want to make, as Carmen said, you are looking for a little bit more acidity, freshness. So in a certain vintage, when you have big wines, muscular, so it brings the good balance you are looking for. So in our house, it depends very much on the vintage, and like every year we sell in bulk all the wines which have not been selected to make our blend. So we have the opportunity to play with Tempranillo, Grenache, a little bit of Mazuelo, a little bit of Maturana also. So it's difficult to say that we always keep the same blend. But it's a very good, it's very positive and a very good grape varietal.
Mm-hmm. I have another great question here, asking, with all these changes that we've spoken about, and with these single vineyards coming in and everything that's happening, where do you see the region going next? And how do you imagine getting there?
Well, I think that it's very important to know about different business concepts. I think that we will still keep these wineries who are blending their wines, keeping the minimum aging in oak and bottle, to label their Crianza reservas and Grand Reservas, and sell at a very competitive price. But on the other end, and I think this is my point of view, of course, the potential we have to look forward is the part of the limited production, because the market is getting more and more niche, and different expectations, and consumers are looking for special wines, right, even though the brand is quite important, but it's the way to rely on the quality, on the style. So in our case, we have been developing different style of wines, and I think that it's a good response to the market. And nowadays there is more and more segmentation, because the occasion of consumption are so diverse. And well, for us also, it's part of our long-term policy, our human investment, and it's important to keep this creativity, dynamism, and at the end we try to make a masterpiece of each bottle. So I think that this is the future I look forward. Mm-hmm. Because it's a way to be different. It's the way to bring different experiences and bring emotions. Because at the end, well, we have been talking about Rioja, but Rioja, it's a great opportunity to bring emotions, to create experiences. We have a very rich tourism. So I think that all these different points are part of our richness, of our diversity. And I think that that's what we have to project in Rioja, and it's great values.
And Ana, what do you, or Carmen, do either of you want to jump in and talk about what you see as the future for Rioja?
Yeah, I think from the marketing perspective, Jacky, one of the, you asked before about the evolutions, and one of them definitely is the recognition of Tempranillo as a grape variety. If we go, people are buying by region or mostly, especially in the United States, by grape variety. Wine lists are crafted by grape variety. Even some wine stores are laid out by grape variety.
Yeah.
So the advancements that have been made by Tempranillo, I think will play a big part in that as well for Rioja. And I do not believe we have the biggest or the boldest, but definitely the finest expression of Tempranillo. And I also, whether I'm doing a media event, a trade, or a consumer event, I will always get a response of, I love Rioja. And it's like, I love Rioja, I love Rioja, I love Rioja. So it's like, oh, I love Rioja. And there's a lot of these comments are coming from people that have not stepped on the soil of Rioja. So something is happening in the glass that is bringing everybody back to Rioja. And part of that definitely is the beautiful balance and harmony of these wines. As when you and I spoke previously, there's a lot of wines that are just not ready to drink, or other ones that are a little bit clumsy. Mm-hmm. And this harmony in the glass is really one piece that is so important. And also at point of origin. In 3 years, tourism to Rioja increased 43%. Wow. I'm sure living there that Carmen and Cristina have been able to see. And so as a tourist, a wine tourist destination.
The tourism increasing to do with wine, or
of course, but then tourism doing with wine, yeah. But the region having all that it takes to be a great destination to experience. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's what drew Carmen and Cristina back to keeps inspiring them. It inspired me. This incredible, as Carmen said, we're really a small place, but the diversity of the terroir, the diversity of the landscape, that you can travel like 20 minutes and it will be totally different. So it's this beautiful place. It's very safe, has history, gastronomy, sports, everything that you can imagine. So I think this destination, as a tourist place of choice, will also play a significant role in everyone experiencing Rioja, for sure.
We have another great question that's coming in now. Maybe Carmen, you want to jump in, and Cristina. Are the young people of Rioja staying in the region and getting into the industry, or are you losing your young people? Is this a problem in Rioja? Do you want to start, Carmen?
Yes. No, the good thing is that young people are working more and more, and not only in the same way the family have done, but also making new projects and looking for a place in the market. And you can see more and more new brands developed by young people. And this is very good because people here is very proud to be Riojano. It is a good thing for them, and they go out for study perhaps, but they are traveling all around the world to know how in other countries are working. And I think it's a good amount of young people who will take continue the production.
Cristina, have you seen that? The young people staying and moving the industry forward?
Well, I would say that one of the only positive thing COVID has brought is that people and young people are aware about health, quality of living, and they are now more considering going back and live in smaller places.
Right. Yes.
Well, to get their children, to get, as I say, well, you can live in the town and just get to the countryside very easily. Here you can go skiing. There's a little place where you can go skiing, and well, we have many restaurants, and well, for having children, it's the right place to live. And while talking about the wine industry, I think that you can find very good jobs, and living here is not that expensive as it is in Barcelona or Madrid. Well, personally, I started to live in Madrid this year because, I've been traveling so much that my daughter is a student in Madrid, and I say, well, time is flying, and I'm so many opportunities, so few opportunities to spend good time with her, that I moved to Madrid. So I go and go back, but I have to confess that quality of living here is super. But I think that young people now are more concerned about going back to countryside, small towns, villages. Yes.
That's an excellent point, and that's something we're seeing all over the world, and it's fantastic for the countryside to be repopulated in this way.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
I have another wonderful question about oak usage. This person wants to know about type and style and amount. What are the trends that you're seeing? And they also want to know about the trends in terms of other aging vessels like concrete or amphora. What have you seen happening recently in terms of aging? So either Carmen or Cristina. Carmen, do you want to talk about that? Any changes in terms of oak usage that you've seen and other vessels for aging?
Well, Cristina, I think will tell us more, but in my case, I like to combine different types of vats for elaboration, and I think that concrete is very good for the end of the process. After aging in barrel, you put it in the concrete for 2 months before releasing, and it gives a little bit of round characteristic to the wine, and I'm really, really happy with the combine of them.
Are you seeing other people using a more concrete than you've seen in the past, or is that?
Yes, much more. And also the coming again these traditional ways of doing in other type of materials as like these amphoras and I'm looking forward to try it. I haven't yet, but I think it's very interesting, and I think it's nice to combine.
What about Cristina? How has your aging regimen changed at the winery?
Well, we put concretes in another winery we have in Rioja. We have been experimenting there because there we are producing white wines, young wines, so we get a better, I would say, experience quicker. So we want to assure this type of decision, even though we try to experiment these contents, because it's quite interesting, and as Carmen said, it helps to round the structure of the wines, a part of the oak barrel. I think that it's a very good tool to bring finesse, elegance. I think that we have to gain a little bit more experience to say so, but at this stage, I think it's a real improvement.
Okay. Yeah. I have a few more commercial questions that I'll let Ana and Cristina tag back and forth on. The first one is to do with consumer awareness and consumer attitudes toward the regions. Have you seen consumer preferences evolving? And are you seeing people maybe trading up more with Rioja wines nowadays? A question. Ana, do you want to start?
Yeah, definitely. I think we always want to increase our awareness and our appreciation for sure, especially in markets as big as the United States and also Canada. But Canada, for example, we've had continual growth with Rioja, and we understand that the wine market is not growing at all. It's at 0%. So for growth, so the fact that we've been trending at 4 or 5% annual growth is wonderful. And definitely in Canada, 35% of what we're exporting are reservas. So that's really quite beautiful because it can use the term trading up. But again, seeking quality Riojas, but at accessible price points. Yeah. And that also has definitely been trending in the United States as well. And I think people are looking at different types of Rioja and then saying, okay, what can I get from another country or another region at this price point? And especially in Canada, I find the consumer a pragmatic thinker and arriving at these conclusions very much themselves without being, flooded by marketing or tools or advertising tools that might come in front of them. And another beautiful thing is I know that Carmen has just produced a gorgeous white Rioja, and that's so super exciting. And there's actually more white Riojas available in Canada than in the United States, and many of them Reserva white Riojas. And that's just a whole nother niche segment market that has to do with different times in Rioja's history as well. That's really quite exciting. So I don't know if I answered the question.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But do you find, so in terms of awareness, if you're looking back at a baby boomer generation, maybe regions like Bordeaux and Rioja and Chianti resonated more with the younger consumer. Do you find that right off the bat, there's awareness of the region of Rioja still the way there has been in the past? Or do you think that awareness is potential?
I think we always want to keep building and expanding that awareness, and that they're getting their information in a very different way. But again, it's all positive because if they have an experience with the Rioja, they're going back to it. Yeah. And so if we can get more velocity in that direction, then that's where we want to go to. Yeah.
Absolutely. And Cristina, there's another part of the question was, in terms of distribution, what are your major markets now? How has that changed, and where do you see that going?
Well, our major market, I would say half part of our exports are going to Europe, but the number one market is United States. So it's a very competitive market where you have so many wine producing areas, countries, local producers. I mean, it's quite challenging, and we face a huge distribution. I think that in our case we have a sole importer with one distributor per state. We are covering the United States with their own distribution. Obviously, we have to balance our sales in the on-trade and off-trade. And in a difficult period when COVID is hurting the on-trade business quite dramatically, but we have been able to sell our wines also in the online segment, which is growing very quickly, and trying to wait for a more normal situation, and also to go back to non-taxes, because at this stage we have to pay 25% of taxes when we export to United States for most of the wines, at least those wines which are above 14 degrees, they don't pay for that. But just expecting a lot of expectation on the future, but we are very positive because as far as the United States, our sales are growing a little bit, and so it has been up to now quite positive because we could resist this COVID situation, which is quite difficult, and we were very worried until August when because we had the threat that these taxes could go up to 100%.
100%, yeah.
So now we are a little bit relaxed, and the only thing we want is that no one will suffer COVID, and that everything will come back to the previous situation, and business will go back also to its normal development.
I think we have time for one more question before we wrap this up, and we've got a great one here. In a digital world, how has your communication with younger consumers, such as millennials, how is it different than other generations? And how are these consumers different than past consumers? So I don't know who wants to start. Ana, Cristina, jump in, either one of you.
Oh, well, I'll give a real succinct response. First of all, that's a great question. And I think the past consumers were definitely getting their information in a different way, weighing a lot more heavily on wine publications, on ratings. And now we're seeing a lot more. They're getting their information digitally, obviously, and their attention span is much shorter and to get it. So they just want it to be delivered kind of quick and more succinct. And it might be a little bit more from word of mouth, where our incredible masters of wine like you and our great authorities are really, impacting the trade and the media in more of a significant way, for sure. Mm-hmm. But that's one piece. But the other piece is that perhaps the advantage too is that they really are looking. They're not weighing so heavily on what a guru might have said or a rating score, but really want to learn and understand. And even with wines that are much more simple, like rosés, if we do different events, really want to understand. So that's definitely a difference that I've seen, which is very positive.
Mm-hmm. Cristina, do you want to weigh in on how in the digital age with younger consumers, how they differ from past consumers?
Well, I agree with Ana. I think that the young people, they learn from the gurus, but to make up their own decision. I mean, they want to look like free to decide, and I think that the way to get them to our wine industry, I don't like wine industry, but it's the global name. It's bringing them these experiences, the pleasure, because I think that they are looking for emotions. So the way to communicate is through emotions. And I just can observe when we get young people visiting, for example, our winery, they just realize what is behind the label. It's such an involvement, and it's a big part of human efforts. And you are part of the message also. So it brings a certain, it helps to build up a certain loyalty, but you have to consider also that they like to change. So this loyalty is from time to time. So it needs to
keep rebuilding it.
That's it. I think that, well, they are young. All of us have been young, so we know how we used to think about things, and it's important that they make their own decision. But at the end, they have this capacity to understand quality wines, and they taste, and they say, even though they are not so knowledgeable, they have the perception to say, I like it or not, and with criteria.
Absolutely, and confidence.
Yes.
I think that's fantastic. We got about 5 minutes left. So I think we have just a minute here that we can, if anybody has any parting thoughts, Carmen or Ana or Cristina, that you'd like to share before we wrap this up. I think this is a great time to just your closing.
Well, I would say that Rioja implies a vocation. I think motivation, a passion. I think that because for many years, if we talk, for example, about Bordeaux, Bordeaux has had this such a long respect and recognition. Many years, more than a century ago. And Rioja got its revival, let's say, as from the 70s. And I think that we have to be quite happy to see the long way we have done in a few years. But, and this is probably the promise that we have another long way to go. And because we have such a great values, such a great terroirs, and people who are so involved with what they are doing. And I would say that they are simple people, but simple in the right way. It's not people who are superficial. They feel the terroir. They have passion for it. And I think that it's probably in this nowadays, it's probably one of the values Rioja has, together with the terroir, obviously.
I love that. But a minute left before I need to wrap this up. Carmen or Ana, would you like to add anything before we say goodbye to our guests?
Well, I would just quickly say that, in terms of what Cristina said, that lots of times when people go to Rioja, their experience is humility and generosity. And the Latin roots of the word humility do not mean inferior, but aligned with the land. And there's no better way to describe Carmen working with the land and generations, and Cristina's family returning to Rioja. We're very aligned with the roots of Rioja. So
beautiful. Well, I want to thank you, Carmen and Cristina and Ana, so much for sharing your time today. I want to thank Wines of Rioja, our sponsor. I want to thank Femmes du Vin for inviting me to be part of this amazing panel. And again, there's so many awesome upcoming events in the Femmes du Vin series at 2:00 today. If you want to just keep listening in, there's a great series on fair labor, 2 p.m. today, and more coming on. You can check them out on the femmesduvin.org website. Make your donations there. Carry on the conversation. You got those hashtags, so get on Instagram to keep talking about this great cause. And it was just such a delight for me to be here with you guys today. Thank you, everybody, for listening in from all around the world. We are so happy to have you here. And until next time, ladies.
Thank you, Jacky. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.